Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Today I'll be going over a special game that I played at the 2023 US Go Congress. Now this wasn't some organized event, or at least not specifically for me. This was, and they have this at every Congress, Pro Simuls. And so basically, if you've been to a Congress you know this, but if you haven't, what happens is they have sign-up sheets, usually put up during the morning rounds of the Open for any pros that have simuls that day. Now, in the past, I usually don't do the simuls because usually it adds just more stress to an already stressful week. But because my opponent was a very special guest, I made sure to try to get a game. And in fact, a lot of people tried to get games. And so the signups were only for 6 people, but people just kept signing up, and so they had to raise the cap to 12. And I think he's a very nice person, so he didn't say anything about doing 12 people. And in fact, my specific slot, I was in the second hour because he was doing 2 hours of simuls, the first half, second half. I was signed up for the second half. And in fact, both groups got 12 people to sign up. So he was basically doing 24 simul games total in 2 hours, which, if you've never done simuls, I've done simuls before. I've done maybe 6 at the most, and it's pretty tiring. So you can imagine doing a lot more than that against a lot stronger opponents for a lot longer time. It's insane. But my special guest opponent is Kim Jiseok, 9 professional, who is top 30 in the world. So at least the congresses I've been to, the pros that come over to the US, they usually fall into 2 groups. They usually fall into new pro, 1P, just became pro, and it's just at the Go Congress to have fun or even sometimes participate in the US Masters. Or a older pro, and I say older in quotes because older could mean late 30s, early 40s. But a pro that maybe is past their prime, or at least definitely not at world championship potential. But having Kim Jiseok here was the first time there was like a world championship level pro player. And so that's why there's a lot of buzz about trying to get games with him. The other pro that was there, or another one of the pros that was there, was Lee Dong-hoon, 9P, who is also kind of in the same boat as Mr. Kim. Didn't get a chance to play him, though. I only got a chance to play Mr. Kim. But yeah, this was my game with Kim Jiseok, 9P. And it was supposed to be, because it was an hour for 6 games. Obviously, with double that, the games, or they took longer than an hour. So it turned into kind of, when games finished, you just go in, right? Just kind of like slide style. And there were 12 tables or boards set up, but still there was a lot of waiting. And when games finished, you just went in and took the empty board. So I went in, got the board, waited for him to come around because he's walking. He must have gotten so many steps just walking from board to board. Again, he was doing this for 2.5 hours almost. More than that, most likely. Gets to me, and when you're playing simuls, especially against stronger players, it's really not about trying to win. It's more about kind of the learning experience. Like, you're not trying to beat them, right? So, I could be like, oh, could I take 4 stones, right? Something like that. But I decided, you know what? I'll actually let Mr. Kim decide what the handicap should be. So when he comes around, I held up my name tag, my lanyard, says 6 don, and he looks at it and he goes, oh, very strong. And I was like, Mr. Kim said 6 don's so strong, so that was like, made me blush a little bit. But he actually said, you can pick whatever. So I was like, can we do no komi? And he's like, okay. So this game is a no komi game, or half komi for white. So a 1-stone handicap game. But yeah, let's jump in. I'm not going to do a full-on review like I would with my tournament games, because this was definitely more casual. But even though it was casual, because there was no clock, people were talking, like the space was casual, I was still obviously trying to do my best. And obviously I was very nervous as well. Very nervous as well. There's an aura that strong players have that you can just feel when you're playing them. So I was trying not to let that get to my head. And this is also very similar to my second round game. And this was actually, I believe, on the third day of competition. So I was 2-1 at this point. But I remember allowing something similar. This, if you remember this from my second round game, playing this one, I was like, I could do this, but I was like, no, we'll just keep things simple. And speaking of simple, the amazing thing about this game is how simple Mr. Kim makes this game feel. There were so many times when I was reading that I was like, oh, here we go. Here comes the big fight, or here comes a big decision. And he just plays a very simple move. A very simple move. And that comes up quite a bit, actually. It's like, obviously he's playing 11 other games, so he can't really think so deeply. But yeah, so again, playing this, and then again here. Again, the Joseki choice obviously is going to be close to perfect. And so this one makes total sense. A lot of players are familiar with this one, so they like to do this one. But once you've already pincered, it's actually not so good, because as opposed to playing here, this would be what white wants. Black's going to actually take the corner. And whether white blocks directly or plays this variation like this extension here is too close. So white's actually a little bit over concentrated here. So you can't, if you're pincered, you kind of don't want to auto go to this Atari, basically. So he goes here. Which again, if I play here, this would basically lead to the other variation, just in a different order. This is the normal move that you would play against this. And let's say we don't have this exchange. And white went here. This would be reasonable. You just connect, and the shape might look funny. But after you extend, this shape here, or this extension here, is actually pretty solid. It's actually pretty solid. So, yeah, this would be like okay for black, or okay for both sides. But with the pincer there, obviously, after this, I can't make that extension anymore. And even if I can counter pincer and maybe something like this happens, like, doesn't feel too great. Doesn't feel too great. I'm really the one under attack, and white's building a huge left side. So, yeah, didn't want to do that. And so, the only other way I could see how to handle this is if I fight this ko. White takes. The problem is, this early on, I have no ko threats, right? Maybe I can play this one, but white would just connect, and again, if I hane, white can even cut. If I just descend, white can still live. If I hane, like, there's just nothing really great for a ko threat. So that's why in the game I play here. And so the idea is I'm making ko threats before I start the ko. And so it's actually quite nice. Throughout the week, I actually was able to talk to Mr. Kim, not only about Go, but just about, just general things, his hobbies. I found out he went to Niagara Falls on the off day on Wednesday. And yeah, we chatted a bit. It was cool. It was cool. You have to remember that these pros are also humans, right? And so being able to just have a conversation with them, it feels good. It feels nice. But of course, we didn't only talk about non-Go related topics. We talked about Go, of course. And so at the banquet, so on the final day, I was talking to Kim. Got his autograph as well. He autographed a fan of mine. And I asked him about the game we played, because I didn't get a chance to after this game because he actually had to go to a VIP dinner with all the pros, and they were actually waiting for Kim's Simuls to finish. That's how late this Simul went. But one of the moves he mentioned was the attachment here, and he said, "Oh, when you played that attachment, I didn't know what to do." So that either tells me this move is so strange that it kind of threw him off, or that it is actually an okay move. And I thought it was okay as well. I thought it was okay too. But he did compliment me on this move, so I was pretty happy with that. And so again, I'm just trying to find co-threats. So depending on how white will play will change how I play here. So that's why he just backs off. He doesn't want to give me co-threats. So I Hane. He turns. Again, you might be tempted to capture this. Again, I don't know if I would do this immediately, but just for the sake of argument. After this, like, white's going to be pressed down pretty badly. Again, we can imagine maybe something like this. Maybe Hane. Like, white's living, but black's thickness is going to be superior. So that's why he really wanted this turn. But now I can play down. And the difference is, if I had done this earlier, white would be able to peep here, and my shape is really bad. I don't have a base. White can even extend here, and yeah, this would be pretty bad for black. Black basically has a weak group in the opening. But after these exchanges here, I can play here because now there's no peep Aji. White can't peep here. I can just block. So I was actually pretty happy with this, and he even just extends. I was like, okay, that seems reasonable, but I will play up top. Play up top. If I was playing maybe people my level, I would play more adventurous. But I did not want to get into huge complications early on because I wanted the game to get to counting. Yeah. Because there was a 6-star next to me who started pretty similar time as me. And we became pretty good buddies at the Congress. But I feel for him because his game ended after like 15 minutes or so because he misread a ladder. So I was trying to avoid that. I was trying to avoid a game-ending mistake. So I was just like, okay, I'll extend here. And even here, I was like, okay, I'll just extend along the side. I can't lose the game from this move. Yeah. And with my 6-down friend who made that mistake, it was funny because he was reading the ladder, and then my friend played the ladder, and Kim comes around, keeps playing the ladder, and points zigzags across the board and goes, doesn't work. And my friend just facepalmed like, oh my goodness, I spent 3 minutes reading that and I still read it wrong. So that was pretty humorous, but I did want to avoid that scenario. So I was trying to avoid huge complications. And then white goes here. And so this was the first move where I was like, I've actually never considered that move. And it seems quite harsh. Because obviously my two choices here were either play on the right side or play up top somehow. But I didn't see a great move to play up top. Like, obviously I could kick and jump, but that doesn't really build the top. So that's why I left it. When you don't know how to play locally, Tenuki. Wait for the board to change. And the only move I was really considering where I didn't think white would go here, although this does have potential. This also has potential, but it's a hard call. Maybe I would block here and just let white take some points. I get the thickness. And also, obviously, the shoulder hit. This is very common, shoulder hit or attach. But this one I've never seen, at least in this context, and this move makes a lot of sense. Because whenever you're invading, you want to create options for yourself, right? You want to create options. So if I can simply just surround the stone, like this would be bad for white. But when you have this shape, this move connects. This move connects. So I have to find a way to prevent that. If I go down, well, white will just come out. I don't know, maybe lightly, not sure. White could even come down with me and say, okay, let's fight here. You're cut off as much as I'm cut off. So again, I didn't know how to play locally, so I played elsewhere. So I went here. Descend, descend, descend. And again, this is a very big move to drop down here, but then I would attach. And this would be attacking this from afar because I'm able to prevent that connection here and then go back and attack, something like this. Obviously, Mr. Kim knows this. Again, nothing I'm doing is like, oh, I don't expect him to see this. It's just trying to play your best and maybe make better decisions. Is he jumps. And I'm like, oh my. Of course he jumps. I can't actually capture this stone at D17. Because after this, if I block this way, white connects here. If I block this way, white connects here. But there is still something I can do, and that's bump here. And a lot of players would Atari here directly and then try to find a way to live. But this is Ajikeshi. Maybe you want to cut here, right? In fact, you want to cut here. But right now it doesn't work, so playing here makes it work. So if white descends, you can see now I've prevented that connection because now I can bump down and capture. But what's funny is even here I was like, oh, well, white's going to still descend. And even though I can capture now, I'm going to get a not alive group. And so I was expecting actually this. I was expecting this, and I didn't even know what I would do. Do I attach here and run out like this? But white would build the left side. The stone is not doing much. I'm still not alive. But again, obviously I don't think he's trying to kill me instantly. But two, just how simple he plays. Just how simple he plays. Because again, I think he could play this way. And maybe in a championship game for him, he would. But he just descends. And if I just crawl, obviously this would be bad for me. This would obviously be bad. But I can clamp. I can clamp. Your opponent's key move is my key move, right? If I Hane and white goes here, what happens if I go here? Well, what happens if white disconnects me? Well, then I can actually cut. And this works fine. This works fine. So, yeah, that works fine for me. So, in the game, connect, and just connects back. Hane, fix, white stands up. And here, this was the other move, or one of the other moves he commented at the banquet on what I should have done, is he said, yeah, you should save the stone. You should save the stone. And I jokingly told him, I don't want to fight a 9p, which he chuckled at, but truthfully, I didn't even consider fighting here because I just look so much weaker. I just look so much weaker. Yeah. But maybe it's possible. Maybe it's possible. It was so complicated. And again, when you're playing these simuls, you're supposed to think while the pro isn't there, but once the pro comes around to where you are, you're supposed to play your move. And so I didn't have hours to think on this game. So this kind of variation here would take a lot of reading. So I just went with the simple one. Play there, and then so I was happy-ish with connecting underneath. While it is second, third line moves, it is fully connected, and it's not a small amount of points either. So I was okay with this result, and I could still save this later if I wanted to. White peeps, block, just block once, and then connect. White fixes, And now I've sent it again, so I play on the left side. Again, I have a hard time playing moves like this inside my own territory, but this kind of move probably is perfectly reasonable. Because I kind of want white to come in so I can attack it. I kind of want white to come in. So I play here, and again, white played the same kind of shape up top. So, yeah. And this is a move that you'll see is a way to attack this corner. And usually the move I expect is this. Like, this is the usual follow-up I see. So I don't know if he's testing me or what, but I was like, huh, interesting. So in this case, again, I need to prevent the connection somehow. If I just jump, after this, you'll see the reason why this connects is after here, I am unable to cut and connect on the same turn, right? So if I descend, white can cut, and then capture. And if I connect, obviously white connects. So that's why in the game, played here, and you might say, well, you're not even disconnecting, so what are you doing? But this is disconnecting because if you play the same variation, notice now white cannot play at d7. So this is disconnecting, white pokes. And here, I spent a good while on this move. Because again, now that we're starting a fight, this is when the game can end quickly, right? It's really hard to lose in the opening, but whether it's the first fight or the last fight, you could drop the game at any point. But basically here, I'm like, well, I can't really connect anyway, at least from my reading. Right, if I play here, white pokes. If I play like this, white will attach, and see I'm getting cut up. So I was like, okay, then I'm not going to try to connect. And so this move is trying to be light and say, okay, maybe I can connect, or maybe I can't. But if you play the same kind of moves, it's not hurting the stones as much because it's not touching, right? Here, white's touching the stone. So it's harder for me to go elsewhere, but if white just goes like here, well, then maybe I can just connect, or maybe just go down, or the idea was if white wants to cut me, it won't be as severe on my stones locally. But white just goes there. And I was like, okay, I will play here. And I was so proud of this move. Basically saying, okay, well, white can't push and cut because obviously this is an Atari. Instead, white just Ataris and then plays here. And this was very strange to me. But maybe it makes sense. During the game, it was strange to me. And then white, yeah, I was like, why is white making me much stronger? But white realized, okay, I already got my profit on the bottom, so now let me get moves here. But here I was like ready to fight this ko. But obviously this ko is quite heavy for white because if white loses this ko, white can lose the whole lower left. So it makes sense for white not to fight the ko, but like something I tell my students is, oh, always fight the ko, right? But like, because descending gives black this extra forcing move. Like if you change the order, if I descended here, white wouldn't connect here. So it gave me an extra forcing move. So I was like, there's no way he'll descend, but he descended. So yeah, I guess try not to be so rigid with your moves is a good thing, right? Like I'm always like, oh, always be willing to fight the ko. Don't give your opponent extra forcing moves. I guess you can't think so linearly like that. But yeah, so white takes. And here, this was a minor mistake too, is I can just block here. Because if white wants to cut me, I can still live on the bottom. Right, I can just cut here. And I should feel confident enough to be able to handle this group in the center. Make an eye on the left, I can still run out. And I even gain something on the bottom because white cutting forces me to cut here. It forces me to cut here. So I actually gain something as well. So I should play here. You'll see white gets this Atari at e3, and then this push here later. So even though I'm connecting, it's not as good for points to do that. So now white comes in, and then just kick. And then white jumps here. Yeah, this move is super nice. It's more of an unsung proverb, but stones that are on the same lines are super strong. So if you're watching stronger players and they're playing moves that are on the same line, like here, these stones are on the N line and these stones are on the 12 line, they have a better connection than stones that are maybe one line off. So this move felt super nice. Yeah. So attach. So now I'm back to growing the right side. So attach, white bumps, and then white plays there. That's Sente. And then I'm like, okay, I got to reduce this top. So I play here. And again, I feel like white could have played some move like this and threatened to kill me. But white just simply plays here. I jump. White jumps. And then I jump across. And I really wanted to play here. Assuming white blocks, I can cut here. And this cut leaves a nasty cut here in white shape. And obviously cuts these off. But the problem is this push is not Sente. Is white will connect. After I push up, notice I still can't save this stone. Still can't save the stone. And even if I could, white's going to come into the right side. And this is much bigger than the top. Assuming I try to separate white, if white jumps something like this, it's just tricky. It's difficult. So I just cut. White captures, and I'm able to cut through. Now white's able to save, but in the process, I'm able to build the right side. So again, I'm feeling surprisingly good. Now I know he's not trying to go all out, but even with that, like, even though he's not trying to go out, he's still much stronger. So the fact that I'm able to hang so far, I was pretty pleased with myself. And it's funny, even though this was not a tournament game, this was probably the best played game I played in the whole Congress. Potentially my 6-round game was better, but like this game, I feel pretty happy with. And part of that, I think, is there was no pressure to win. As much, at least, right? Now, obviously, I am trying to win. But if I lose, it's like, okay, I was expecting to lose, right? Now, people don't just beat 9Ps for free. And again, if I lose, like, who cares? Who cares? It's for the learning experience. Whereas in tournament, I'm like, oh, I gotta win. I gotta win. There's a lot of pressure. So, yeah. This game I'm pretty pleased with. Jump, fix this push and cut. White descends. And this kind of position, I always have a hard time with. What is bigger, blocking the corner or blocking here? I always have a hard time with this. I feel like blocking here because white can potentially reduce more. But the flip side is white can make more points in the corner. Push. And here, usually I will just connect, but I was like, no. I'm going to try to take Sente. So I played there. And this move, yeah, this move is crazy. Basically, if white just blocks, which is a very Honte move, this still allows me to monkey jump later. So white goes here to prevent the monkey jump and fix the connection. So again, efficiency is everything. So block. So again, like I'm happy. Like wow, I made like 20 points in the center there. White Ataris. This was that Sente I was talking about. White bumps, and there's a really cool move here coming up soon. Atari, and then I fix in the center. This is why though it's hard to make points in the center. I had to spend 1 move, 2 moves, 3 moves. Like I took Gote 3 times to build the points in the center. So that's why usually you don't want to do that. But yeah, so let's look at the lower right. The move that I've learned is this one. Because if you just connect, black can get this Hane and Sente. Right? And so playing here, even though black can Hane, it's not Sente anymore. But this move by itself is Gote. I could go elsewhere at this point. Yeah, maybe like turn here. So how can white find a way to take Sente here? And that's by going here. And so when I saw this move, one of my other friends I met at Congress, was watching me play when Mr. Kim played this move, he looked at me and was like, wow, that move is so good. And it is. And so the idea is, okay, well, if white just blocks, then it's not sente. But you'll have to fix, and black has sente. But the idea is white's going to sacrifice a few points. White's going to back off like this. But in the process, make it so that I have to play here. And notice, this is really important. White keeps an eye in the corner. If white doesn't keep an eye in the corner, white loses these 3 points, this point at Q1, and this point at O2, because white will have to fill in all those shapes there. So, yeah, that's really important with this shape here at least. But this is like so crazy. And it is pretty much sente because after white turns here, I can't block. So all of this would be free for white, which is too big. So I had to block. And then once I block here, white gets this sente. So again, white's order of moves here is so good. White plays there and then turns. So yeah, so the meat of the game is basically over. But yeah, I was very happy with the game. And yeah, the end result of the game. So because he had to go somewhere, the game definitely got quicker. Because he had to go to the VIP dinner. And so in the process, I messed up the recording a little bit, ever so slightly, towards the end. But it's not super... The game was already decided at that point, so it wasn't super important for me to get that, or to get every detail at that point. So, yeah, but the end result of this game was white by 7.5. And so I was... One, I knew it was close. I didn't think I was winning, but I was like, you know what? This looks pretty good. You know, the right side's pretty big. That center's pretty big. But yeah, I wish you could see how many points white took out by getting to the upper right. That's like one of the regrets I had, I guess you could say. But yeah, pretty happy with this game overall. And he even said himself, wow, you played very strongly. Now again, do I think he was playing at full potential? Probably not. But even still, I was pretty happy. Yeah, this is where... oh, no, I guess that makes sense. But yeah, this end game is not exactly correct. So, yeah. And there is Aji post-game. Because, again, we were just like, okay, fill in Dame. Let's count really quick because you got to go to the VIP dinner. And so, maybe the board ended like this. Maybe it didn't. But this cut here actually works for black. And if this works, then black can win. Because here, descend, and then black can cut. And obviously white needs to Atari this stone. Otherwise these stones here will get captured. But then black can Hane here. And no matter what white does, it's either Seki or white dies. So if white Ataris, black can descend here. And, or even black can connect. It's depend which stones do black want, because white can't Atari here. So even if white makes an eye, then black can descend. White would die. If white takes, obviously black would Atari. So that doesn't work. If white doesn't take away Atari and white just makes an eye, black can play here, and this would be a second. But again, one, if we weren't rushing in endgame, he would definitely see this. And two, I don't even know if this is what the end of the board looks like, because again, we were both rushing, and so the game record got messed up. But yeah, end result, white by 7.5, and I was super pleased with myself. And I'm gonna end this review with a kind of a mini story. If you were at the Congress and you went to Mr. Kim's lecture he did on the final day on Friday, then the story you heard, but I just kind of want to reiterate it as kind of like a parting message from the Congress and from Mr. Kim himself. But on the final day on Friday, and by final day, obviously Saturday was had the last round of the Open and the banquet, but this was the final day for like other events like lectures, game reviews, that kind of thing. This was actually the only lecture Mr. Kim did was on Friday. And the lecture, it was supposed to be a 2-part lecture. and it was a 2-part lecture on endgame, how to count endgame. And I was there for that. It was okay. Between the language barrier, the complexity of the topic, and his file not saving correctly, so he didn't have a full file, it was rough around the edges. Do I get what he was saying? Yes, but it was a bit hard to follow at times. And he kind of knew that too. And so for the second part, he basically said, would you guys rather I do something else? And we were like, maybe. And he's like, what if I review my game with Koji? And everyone was just like, yes, let's do that. That sounds so much more entertaining and interesting. So instead of doing a 2-part, or the second part of the endgame lecture, he ended up reviewing one of his games with Koji. And it's funny hearing his commentary. It was a Nongshim Cup. I forget what year, but he was the second to last player. Nongshim Cup is the team tournament between China, Japan, and Korea. He was the second to last player for Korea, and Koji was the last player for China. Those were the final players left. And so there was a lot of pressure, obviously, because not only are you playing for yourself, but you're playing for your whole country, basically. But it was funny hearing his commentary, because, again, they're humans too, right? So these kind of things that you wouldn't expect a pro to be saying or thinking, he was thinking. So, for example, he was saying stuff like, oh yeah, I played this move because I knew it would make Koji mad. Or, I got enjoyment out of seeing him getting frustrated with my moves. Things like that. Or he was doing Sabaki on the left side, and he was saying, yeah, looking back, I have no idea what I was thinking here. So things like that that you would think would be reserved to us amateurs. No, just world champions think about it too. So that was great. The review was great. I actually learned a lot, and everybody enjoyed it immensely. But that's not the point of the story I'm bringing up. So after he did the review, he said he wanted to do a little speech. And for this speech, he had a translator translate it for him, because the review he was trying to do in English as much as possible, and the endgame lecture he was doing in all English, basically. But for this kind of speech or story he wanted to do in all Korean to get his message across. So basically, around the time of the Nongshim Cup game, or maybe even earlier, I forget, I want to say like 2013 or 2015, like that time range, but I can't remember exactly. But basically, he had a mental block against Park Jung-won. He could just not beat Park Jung-won. And at that time, it was all about winning for him. It was winning or bust, basically. And he was saying how he was actually getting some mental issues because of this, because everything was about winning. It almost took the enjoyment out of it. So he actually went to a therapist, and he was saying how most of the therapists that he went to gave general advice that didn't help for him. So he thought it wasn't going to help much. But then he met a different therapist who gave him, he said, advice that has basically reinvigorated his Go career. He said he started beating Park Jung-won again. In fact, 2 weeks before the Congress, he played a match against Park Jung-won and even beat him then. So this must be something that has stuck with him, because if he's beating Park Jung-won years later still, obviously it was helpful. And so basically this was his advice. And I wrote it down. I forget if this was verbatim or like a summary of what he said, but basically the advice that his therapist gave him and he gave to us was show gratitude to your opponent. Do not focus on winning, but rather working with your opponent to create the Go you want. So basically, before, when it was all about winning, he didn't care about his opponent. He was just like, oh, I gotta win. But ever since he heard that advice, whenever he played a game, he would thank his opponent. I don't know if he meant like verbally say thank you, or just even in his head, like, oh, thank you for taking the time to play this game with me. So he said he started doing that, and he started seeing better results in tournaments because of it. So this was actually something I've actually told people before. So hearing, top 30 player in the world kind of think the same way is actually quite neat, quite cool. And then the other part, working with your opponent to create the go you want, was pretty eye-opening, because it basically means you can play any go style or way that you want. Yeah, and so if we take it to an amateur level, does that mean, oh, because the AI suggests you do 3-3 invasions, does that mean you should do it? Well, if you want to, you can. If that's what you want to do, you can. But if you don't want to, just play what you want to play. And so hopefully it was eye-opening for me, because my style by itself is pretty, I don't want to say reckless, but pretty chaotic, maybe is a better word. So basically getting like reinforced that, yeah, you can play this way. And maybe you won't win every game, but as long as you're getting enjoyment out of it, that's the way you should play. Like, was pretty eye-opening for me. So yeah, I just wanted to share those parting words that I learned from Kim Jiseok. But yeah, this was my Simul game I played with Kim Jiseok. It was actually probably the highlight of the Congress, because when am I going to be able to play a top 30 player again? Anytime soon, at least. Probably never, honestly. Probably never. But he did say he was. I asked him, and I said, would you come to more Congresses? And he said he would. So that's pretty exciting and something to look forward to. So come to future Congresses if you want to potentially meet Kim Jiseok and maybe other strong professionals. But yeah, if you made it this far in the video, if you made it this far and you wanted to listen to that kind of story at the end, I appreciate that. But regardless, thank you all for watching. Thank you for watching, hopefully, all of my Congress games. This is the final wrap-up for the 2023 US Go Congress. And overall, I had a great time, and I hope to see more of you at the next one. But yeah, thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next video.